Let's go ahead and I think we should begin and people will join us when they can. Welcome everyone. My name is Holly Lawrence and I'm the Assistant Dean, the Office of Career Success here at Eisenberg. And we are super excited to be bringing this resume workshop to you today. It is the first we're offering during this year. We have several upcoming, one a month through, I think we've scheduled through June. So that schedule is posted on our new career and professional development platform, iConnect. And we've been sending you some communications about iConnect and hope that you have found it. Its URL currently is success.eisenberg.umass.edu. I say currently because we are probably going to change it to iConnect.eisenberg.umass.edu. So that's going to be coming and we'll have a redirect for that. But for now, you can find it at success.eisenberg.umass.edu. And we've got a bunch of materials and resources for you there. We will record this. In fact, recording is in progress now and post this workshop session on iConnect. So it'll be available for you and others who want to access it later. We'll do that with each of the workshops we're running this academic year. So without further ado, I will turn things over to our guest today, or I should say our leader of this workshop. I'm just going to be behind the scenes and he's going to be running the show, and that is Nick Wegman. He's the Executive Director, Chase Career Center, which is part of the Office of Career Success. And he is our resident expert on resumes, a guru of all things career and professional development. Nick, I'm turning it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Holly. Welcome, everybody. We're going to go through several pages that will lead us up to the point where we're going to have a pretty good idea what a resume should be doing for you, and in fact, what a resume does for talent acquisition people. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some insights with regard to how you might construct your resume to be able to get across the messaging. And we'll talk more about what I think the messaging should be that will be helpful to you in your job search. So we're going to start right away with the question, why do organizations hire MBAs?
Recording in progress.
And I think it's pretty important for you to realize that there is intent with regard to you from a job seeking point of view, but there's also intent with regard to the company or the organization or the talent acquisition people with regard to finding talent that they value. And there are certain things that they value in the mix. They call it their talent mix. So the first thing that they're interested in is your past education, but so your past education could be aligned with your MBA, or it could be very different from your MBA. They understand that. And depending on what industry they're involved in or what their company, how their company represents itself, your past education may be more aligned with the identity of the company, but your MBA education or possibly some of your past experience may be more aligned with a specific function. So one of the things they're going to be clearly looking for is clear definition with regard to your past education, and they're going to want to know more about your MBA, either your courses or the skill sets that you're gaining with your MBA. That's number one. Number two is, this is very important, they're going to be looking for past experience, whether that past experience might be life experience, it might be work experience, it is going to be experience that you are going to be bringing to the interview process, hopefully bringing to the company. And generally, we talk about industry experience. You're familiar with a certain industry. You may not have had all elements of the industry, but you have a sense of what a particular industry is seeking. And the other, and this one is probably more important for most of you, you will probably have some functional knowledge, a job title or a position that you've done or a series of positions that you've done that you will be able to present to the potential new company. Third element, very important, these are really more of the personal assets, will be leadership, which can be demonstrated in several different ways. Adaptability is a word that we've been hearing a lot in the last 2 years. And I think that the other word, and it can mean different things to different people, is this idea of innovation traits. At the MBA level, leadership is very important. Adaptability is a must now in our marketplace. But this idea that you can do things a little bit differently is perfectly okay. Now, the key to this, and many of you will have heard this before, either in your undergraduate programs or possibly as you've moved around on your own, this idea that there are transferable skills, things that you have experienced that you can bring to the new situation is going to be paramount. We'll spend a lot of time talking about transferable skills. You will spend a lot of time identifying transferable skills and incorporating them into your communications, your career communications. There's also a feeling that if you're in an MBA program now, which you are, then you are going to be hearing about studying, getting to understand. You will certainly be introduced to the latest, the newest management insights. And there's been a lot of change, especially a lot of change with regard to moving from everybody being in place, generally in a company site, to everybody being remote. That's very much changed managerial style. That's very much changed the nature of teamwork. Frankly, that has very much changed the idea of how we interact with one another as employees or members of a team or members of a group. And then the final thing that they are looking for, and it covers a lot of different bases, is this idea of interpersonal style, your personality, the attributes, your leadership style, whether you're comfortable, if you're confident, a series of things along those lines. We can go ahead. Now, when you're assessing how you want to move forward, I think it's important because we have a very broad or wide array of MBA students in our program. We're proud of that. We think that that's a strength. But for each of you individually, you need to take a look at yourself, do some self-assessment, and you need to come to some understanding about your current strengths. I call those building blocks, and any opportunities you have to improve your situation. I call those gaps that are going to help you meet a specific or a set of specific career objectives or possible career outcomes. Generally, that can be broken into two. There's actually more, there's a lot of subsets, but many of you will be what we would call a career changer. And in that case, you're often looking for your MBA to help you either retool or reposition yourself in the marketplace. You are seeking a change, either in industry or in function, from what your past experience has been. Complement to that, a little bit different situation, there will be some of you who are in jobs. You already have built some functional understanding or some functional excellence, or you have some insights with regard to the work that you like to do or the work that fits your skill sets well. And in those cases, what we're going to be talking about is how you can enhance the understanding of your functional capability or your functional capability within a specific industry. And I'm not trying to make this complex. I'm actually trying to break this down because each one of these is a little bit of a shift in a larger path, but these two paths are highly recognizable, both very acceptable to recruiters, and people on either of these paths have very significant outcomes that they can pursue. So it's not one is better than the other. It's just a fact that in our many years of working with students like yourself, we can see these points of differentiation. Okay, Holly, we can move on. Now, I think it's important that when you begin this process, when we begin to have this discussion about a resume, and the resume is in light of the need to change a career or accelerate a career, there's a couple of things that need to happen that you need to do. Sometimes I'm able to help you do it, or other people in your life will be able to help you do it. But you definitely need to do some assessment, and you need to think about some of the skills that you have, or some of the strengths that you have, or some of the experiences that you have had that will be helpful to you. Things that ring your bell, things that get you excited. Frankly, things that you don't want to do anymore, things that are a bit of a turnoff. And you're going to be creating pluses and minuses so that you can get a little bit better profile of the things that you are seeking and the things, frankly, that you either want to avoid or downplay so far. Now, once you do that, you are going to begin to segment the job marketplace, and you're going to be segmenting the job marketplace in a couple of different ways. Sometimes it has to do with a position or a title that you're already fully aware of and you've had some experience with. Sometimes it's a functional area, and you may be at one level, but you now have the desire to move to a higher level within that functional specialty. Another thing that will often happen is you will be in a functional area in a specific industry, not a company, an industry. But because you're in that industry, you have a great deal of insight into what makes players in that particular industry more or less competitive. So you're going to be looking at that. A fourth level would be a specific company where you understand the company, you understand the intent of the company, you understand the culture in the company, you like the company, but you now want to move to the left or to the right or up inside the company based on your capability so far and this addition of some new educational skills and some new things that you're going to bring. And then the final thing, I don't actually think it's the strongest thing, but given what we've just been through here the last 18 to 24 months, many of you will be very concerned about a regional approach. You're interested in being in a certain city or in a certain area of the country, or you're interested in moving from wherever you are to some place that you believe is going to be a better place for you, your family, however you're measuring that. Now, once we start talking about those things and you begin to have some targets in mind, then we will be very interested in assuring not just your resume, even though today's discussion is going to be about resumes, but we are going to try very hard to get you to think about the content and the messaging that you carry in your resume needs to be aligned with the content in your LinkedIn profile. And when you actually get to the point of identifying specific positions, you are going to want your cover letter to reflect what's in your resume, which is also being mentioned or supported in your LinkedIn profile, but you're going to be making some very specific statements about your transferable skills or your potential fit for a specific position. And behind the scenes now at Eisenberg, we have 3 people that are working on these types of connections, all right? Resumes for me, LinkedIn content for one of the members of our team, LinkedIn networking capability for another member of the team, and cover letters for one of the other individuals. And there's a lot more synergy now between how you will be presenting your personal messaging with regard to your intent. Thanks, Holly. Now, over the years, I definitely get a lot of questions about how to do this. We're actually going to talk about this utilizing 2 different pages, but I've made some notes that I think will be helpful to you. If you look at the first horizontal box, I really think that what we're trying to do here in the first box is identify some personal and some professional qualifications, strengths, skills, and areas of expertise. That's going to require you to do a kind of an introspective look at what you do well, what you don't do so well, and those things that you have experienced, but maybe it wasn't in your functional expertise, that you found very interesting or that you thought would be a potential for you to slide from your past experiences in the direction of this other element that you identify. But most of this here is about your personal and your professional qualifications, although it will include, and I mentioned this before, your undergraduate education, and it is going to include some of the skills and some of the things that you are going to learn about while you're pursuing your MBA, the classroom content, the opportunity that Eisenberg is going to give you to explore some of these personal side questions. The next box is really much more focused on what I would call work and life experience, because that's a very different situation and can be influenced by what you have experienced so far, but can also be influenced by some things we can help introduce you to that you may not actually even be aware of now. It involves you taking a look, almost researching a series of potential targets to find out more about a new industry, to find out more about a different functional area, to find out what some of the more current job titles and position functional expectations are. And there's a number of ways to do that, but that is outside of yourself and you beginning to tune in to the needs of the recruiters, which is reflecting the needs of the companies, which in turn is reflecting the needs of the industry. And then you have to be able to be responsive to that. And it's not overwhelming. I'm going to give you in a couple of minutes an opportunity to visit some sites that will help you get a better understanding of this. Okay. Now, when the question is, what kind of industry or organization am I interested in pursuing? For many of you, if you're accelerating, you may very well want to accelerate on the basis of you have an industry or you have a function that you really enjoy. You simply are a little bit frustrated, or you want to go a little bit faster with regard to accelerating into positions of more authority or management positions or positions with a sort of a broader span of control. That happens a lot. I don't think it's 50-50, but we have an awful lot of students, especially students that are joining after multiple years of work experience, that are very much interested in that category. Now, there's going to be others of you who are in these programs. You are sure that you're in the right program. I think this is a very, very positive time to be in an MBA program. I know there's a lot of things going on in the marketplace. It can seem confusing, But if you look at all of the factors, there's an awful lot of companies now that are realizing that they've had a bit of a talent drain. They're anticipating that they're going to have more losses of very experienced, probably more senior workers, and they have a need for entry-level people. That's good news for undergraduate students, but they also have a need for people to come in the middle ranks who have some of the new capability that you're going to be learning in your MBA, in addition to the value of your past experience. That's why if you have a situation where you've got several years of work experience, you're now retooling, or you are at least adding the MBA to your skill sets, you will find yourself people will be very interested in how you present the value proposition that they in fact are looking for. There's going to be a lot of MBAs hired. There's also going to be a lot of changes in the professional workspace expectations. Now, the only thing that I want to mention, in fact, let's go to the next page and I'll do it there. So I oftentimes have people, they want to know a little bit more about where you can get some of this insight. And I really think this is one of the most important takeaways from this presentation. There are professional organizations that are attached to different functions and that provide wonderful sounding boards and a great opportunity for networking, and frankly, an awful lot of information about current events or trends that are impacting their fields. I'll give you some examples now. If you were interested in operations, process improvement, quality, anything really that touches on replicating and getting to more precise decision-making in the chain of command, that generally is called operations. And there is a group which is called APICS. This is all capital, APICS, which used to be known as the Society for Operations Management. Another organization that you may or may not have heard of is the Association for Supply Chain Management. And supply chain management really has been the outcome of a lot of work that was done in quality programs, Six Sigma, which was a subset of quality programs, all of the work that was done with regard to process improvement, and there were a lot of different names for it. Lean is a capability in the marketplace. Some of you may be familiar. That falls into this category. It all has to do with smoothing, understanding, measuring, and to a great degree, researching and identifying opportunity in your entire supply chain, from where you buy parts, where you buy components, how it's shipped, where it's stored, how it's built, where it's packaged, where it's stored, how it's reshipped, and most importantly, how it's used by the end user. It is a huge area. Didn't used to be a huge area, but it's a huge area now, and one that seems to appeal to many of our MBA students. Now, each one of those organizations does have the professional organization that I just mentioned to you, but they also create the opportunity for students to peek into those associations, because each one has one variety or another of a student membership. So if you are in a quality program like our program, you can contact right at their website. For instance, at ASCM, it's ascm.org, and you will be able to identify how to attach yourself to that particular organization as a student member, in their case, at no charge. For the Society of Human Resource Management, I think it's a $25, possibly as much as $40 charge. However, the benefits of access to their job board, their internal industry-driven job board. So if you're focused on HR or anything that has to do with organizational change or organizational improvement, that would be an invaluable place for you to get information. These professional organizations are understated at many of our competitive schools, but it will be extremely helpful to you because it will provide current insights. You're definitely going to be able to learn more about titles of particular jobs and the functions or the work that those particular jobs are responsible for. And most importantly, you will be able to get information on the skill sets that somebody, a particular recruiter or a particular company is looking for in that position or in a set of positions. So I'd like to go to the next page and we'll just develop this a little bit more. Oh, I'm sorry. Can we go back to identifying potential opportunity? There we go. I want to get this in for you because there's a couple of other places where you can do this. In addition to professional organizations, which many students don't know about, there's obviously the very large job boards that most students do know. And I think it's important that you be aware that LinkedIn is probably the largest. Indeed, INDEED, to me, seems to be the one that is the most segmented and therefore very helpful once you identify some targets. There's also a very high volume job board that our university utilizes. It's called Handshake. You have access to it based on the degree that you're studying. But I want to qualify that a little bit. Handshake entered the marketplace 3 to 4 years ago. They are now the largest that is associated with higher education, but they have a lot of jobs. They do not necessarily have good characterization of the types of jobs by function. They basically list the company name, they list the job title. If you click on it, you begin to get more specific information. But in the case of LinkedIn and Indeed, they do a little bit better job of curating collections of jobs once they understand what you're interested in. So the combination of looking at several positions in LinkedIn, or let's say Indeed, also looking at the dedicated job boards inside the professional organizations. And there's 2 places that you will look when you are dissecting a specific position description that may be of interest to you. In the beginning, you're going to do a lot of research, or you're going to read a lot of job descriptions that may or may not. But the key here is that as you read them, you should be focused on looking at the qualifications. This is the company's statement in a pro forma with regard to how they want you to read what they are looking for in a potential employee. So they will state some qualifications. They're looking for an MBA, or they're looking for a master's level, or they're looking for an MBA specifically in operations, or they're looking for some past experience with an MBA. Those types of phrases that you will read generally in the 1 or 2 sentence bullet points. So you always want to look at the qualifications. And the second place that you're going to be looking, so that's the desired qualifications. But you're also going to look at when they identify the work or the job content, they will make some statements about what a candidate will do if they are hired in this particular job. And you're going to go through and read that because that will also provide you with a great deal of intelligence about what the key phrases are, or the buzzwords, or the signaling that they're doing by the language that they're using. So they might refer to excellent skills in Excel, or must be able to deal with data visualization, or they might be talking about past experience with supply chain, or those kinds of phrases, which are easy to underestimate, but each one of those statements will signal something they would like to see. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to have all of it, but there are things that they want you to have. Now, when you do that, you can be circling those things that you're reading that you believe you can defend and that you already have. And then you could draw a square or a colored marker or whatever you want around the touch points of the work they would like you to do, or the job content that you already know you're capable of doing, that you've experienced, or you did something similar and you could create a transferable skill set argument, or you have a gap. We talked about gaps before, but perhaps you have a gap at one point in the semester, and then based on your studies, or based on something you can do outside of your studies, or something you can do in your current position, you will be able to address that particular gap. So in each case, you are going to be identifying these moving pieces, which you will use to provide a convincing brand image of yourself and answer the unspoken questions about whether you do or do not have much of what it is they are seeking. They're definitely sending you signals, and they're definitely going to back up in the interview process the signals that they send you in those job descriptions. So it's very important that when you go through and you find one that seems to feel good to you, it touches the right buttons for you. You don't necessarily have to have all of those checked, but you should have some of them checked. Some of them you will be marking as gaps, and some you're going to be able to respond to if you think about your past experience and what's ahead in your MBA. So remember, you are clearly identifying the building blocks, the opportunities, but you also are going to be addressing any gaps that you might have. Okay. Now, in the format, I see a lot of different formats. Holly and I have agreed that showing you a lot of different formats in a presentation like this is mostly going to be confusing. So we had some very talented people help us with this. There's definitely some things that must appear in your resume for it to be acceptable in our current resume environment, and that is your contact information. Although your contact information now can be your name, it can be your email contact, it can be your telephone number. It does not necessarily need to include your full address, but it might be wise to have your city, state, and it will absolutely need to reflect your LinkedIn profile. I hope that most of you do think about your resume as being connected to your LinkedIn profile. The numbers that we get now, in more than 80% of the cases, if a company is serious about your application based on what they're seeing in your resume, it's most likely they will have somebody in their chain of command either print out or review your LinkedIn profile. So, you know, back in the day, the resume was very important and the cover letter was very important. There wasn't LinkedIn. And when LinkedIn first started, some companies utilized it, many companies did not. That is old news. Today, your resume, your LinkedIn profile, and access to your LinkedIn is a must-have on your resume. Your experience, well, we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but you must be making statements about your experience You absolutely need to be making statements about your education, and you will have a skills section in most of your resumes. And if you don't have a skills section per se, you will be referring to specific skill sets in some of the bullets that you utilize to support your experience section. Okay. Now, some of you, depending on how many years of experience you have or where you are in your career progression, and whether or not you've been mostly in one industry, but maybe different functions, or mostly in one industry in the same function, or whatever the mix is, those things will go into your resume if they support what it is you are trying to do in your next step. You do not always need a personal summary. You do not always need or an objective statement, but you definitely want to express either in an activities section or as a pointed statement at usually at the top of your resume that you are targeting some specific outcome or some set of specific outcomes. That's very appropriate if you know what that is and that in fact has been tested for you. It's less important if you are exploring or you're younger in your career and there could be multiple objectives. All right. Now, and again, I can advise you with this, but I think this is going to make sense. What you really want to do is lead with whatever is the strongest element, either your education past or your years of experience past, or the combination of your undergraduate education with your new skills in your MBA, if you are going to be involved in some sort of a pivot or some sort of a transition at this point in your career. And then you will place those in order depending on what you want the reader to pursue. So there's no absolute. In many cases, most cases, I think that the fact that you're pursuing an MBA in today's marketplace is a very high order of interest. And there's lots of ways to start with the MBA, follow up with your undergrad, and to say some things about your educational capabilities, and then immediately go to your experience, which is going to be reverse chronological, the work that you're currently doing to the work that you did the longest period ago. Those will be facing. Most of these resumes will be 1 page. Some of the resumes will be as long as 2 pages, but we're really not going to see too many resumes that will be longer than 2 pages. There could be some reasons in some specific positions, sometimes science, sometimes higher ed, occasionally in marketing. There are some situations where you might have a little bit longer one. I'll be happy to chat with people about that if they want to. Okay, now, I think actually in the future, Holly, you and I are going to add a little something to this reminders and takeaways. In the past, because I did a lot more work with resume and a little bit less work with some of the other elements, I might have left these words out, but I want to be sure that you all hear them now. I really think that the way this statement should be is your resume in combination with your LinkedIn content and your cover letter content, and then driven by the networking effort that you're going to be able to deploy through LinkedIn. That is how you are going to communicate your competence and your abilities. That is magical, right? In the past, the resume did a lot, it carried a lot, but I believe now the difference between today's resumes and maybe resumes 2 or 3 years ago is you cannot now separate your LinkedIn content and even the way you present yourself in the cover letter from what's going to be in your resume. There's 3 elements now, and all driven by how well you are able to do your networking. That is the key, is that those are aligned and you very consciously, deliberately keep the messaging appropriate for the instrument. For the resume, it's driven by bullets, sharp statements, performance statements, and things that are catch people's eye. And in your LinkedIn content, it will be supporting that, but giving a little bit more background information and a little bit more depth. And in that cover letter, you will be specifically stating your interest in the job that you're applying for and bringing in a couple of these other elements to reinforce your statement. Now, when I talk here about corporate recruiters and talent acquisition professionals, I want you to understand that the first people generally who see your messaging are corporate recruiters, or sometimes people in HR departments, or even sometimes administrative people in functional departments. They don't necessarily make the final decision. So I think of them as gatekeepers. There's certain things that you need to be sure that your resume is doing. Number one is you really need to pay attention to all the administrative detail, your margins, your spelling, how you format it, whether it's too dense, whether you use too many colors, whether you use crazy fonts, or if you use some sort of unusual format that doesn't play very well for the applicant tracking systems that some of these companies use. The other side of this is once it gets through that administrative process, the gatekeepers, then you're appealing with content that managers will respect, insights into the functional things that you did that they will recognize. So the bullets are actually going to be written thinking of another manager reading the bullet and deciding if you have the insight or you see the connection between what you were doing and what you might be doing in his or her organization. So I want to go back to this final point here. It really could be on page 6. There's no question. The biggest takeaway, the biggest learning point that you can get from this presentation today, and we're certainly going to have time for questions, but is going to these websites, either the Indeed or the LinkedIn or professional organization websites that have job boards, even some other job boards that I didn't mention that might be well suited to your background that you know about. That's where you're going to get the insight and the ability to make some decisions about where you are in your career projection based on what talent acquisition people are seeking now. You're going to see a lot of repetition, and I think that MBAs in general are feeling now or sensing a big opportunity for themselves because talent acquisition people feel like you are going to be able to enter their organization and what they call train up or transition faster than some of the other candidates that you might be competing with. All the way back to the very first slide, there's some real reasons and there's some belief systems in place about the value of an MBA, and you will be capitalizing on those belief systems. So Holly, I'd like to take any questions or go down that panel.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Nick. That was a really informative, helpful presentation, I think. And we did get a couple of questions in the chat. One is about getting links to the things you mentioned. So what we'll do is we'll add a final slide with some links that might be helpful to people. And when we publish the slides and the recording, you'll have them that way. In the meantime, I thought I might just say,
Holly, that won't be too hard because we do have in one of the guides that we were working on, we have a page with all the correct links.
Mhm. So, yeah, that won't be hard to do. I would like to just throw something out. We have a lot of people in our MBA program who are in the sort of advancer versus switcher career phase. And a lot of the things that Nick mentioned might be more specific to people who are looking for a new job. But I would say that doing your research for advancing within your own organization would include taking a look at some of those postings in other organizations and the way people frame things within the industry or in positions that you're trying to achieve within an organization you're already at. So I think those things are helpful for both kinds of folks.
Yeah, if you know a specific job title or a subset of job titles, going to Indeed or going to LinkedIn and perusing, literally dozens of those job titles is very good. It's going to be very helpful. But if you're in a functional area and you know that there's a professional organization that maybe you would have liked to have joined, but maybe you don't want to ask your employer to do that. But because there's a student membership, going into that portal and seeing wording very specific to your functional area will be a huge, huge advantage.
So Nick, we've had a couple of questions about getting help with resumes. And I wrote in the chat to everyone that some of it depends on your needs. We are offering more and more service to the online MBAs in the area of career and professional development, something we're super excited about. So we're still just sort of figuring out what the demand is and what people are interested in getting. So I would say for now, if you want to work with someone one-to-one in this group, Nick, should someone reach out to you directly?
Yes.
Okay, so let's say that. So a couple of folks have asked about that. So we can anticipate that you will reach out to Nick directly. You can find his information on our career and professional development site, iConnect, and I'll type that in the chat. In the meantime, we have a couple of more questions. One is, how can the MBA help people switch their job? And another is related, that is, if you want to be a job changer, how do you publicly alter your LinkedIn without altering your current employer? That's
a
related but tricky question.
Yeah, that's a tricky question. It's a good question, but please repeat the first question. I'll answer that and then we'll do the second one.
How can the MBA help people switch their job?
Okay, I would say that aside from having a series of very specific certifications that would be outside of higher ed, that would be based on some sort of professional development strategy, and again, will oftentimes emanate from these professional organizations. An MBA, pursuing an MBA as background to trying to pivot or change your career is extremely helpful. It may be the most important thing you can do. And the reason is the employer is going to recognize the commitment that you're making to yourself, to increasing your skill sets, to becoming more current, absolutely up to date with regard to whatever business education is transmitting. And you are going to be put into a situation where what you have been doing is going to be challenged by what you are learning. And when you come out of the other end of that funnel, you are going to be much more malleable, much more capable of adjusting to a new setting. So I think it will be very highly valued. It's not a guarantee, depending on what it is that you're going to transition to or what it is that you're going to try to accelerate to. but it is highly desirable. An alternative might be, as I said, to identify currently the function you're in, then identify the function that you would like to be in, and seeing if you can create a series of either certificates or badges or coursework that you will be able to convince the company, that the new company that you're going to be interviewing with matches up well and in fact complements your past experience and then upgrades your skill capability to get the job that you're seeking. I do not think it's equal substitute, but I do think that it's a methodology that has been successful for some students in the past.
Thank you.
So Nick, there was the other question about altering the LinkedIn profile while you're still in current
Yeah.
employment and you don't want to
Yeah.
get people suspicious
Yeah.
about your intentions.
Unfortunately, I think this is kind of the dark side of LinkedIn. And Holly will tell you, sometimes I get in trouble because I'm very candid. Really, if you are in a situation where you're working for company A now, and you've made the decision that you want to change, you do have to be extremely cautious about posting information or increasing your activity or very clearly altering your profile, your LinkedIn profile, because it's so visible. There will definitely be people looking at it. The volume of people looking at your LinkedIn profile is clearly going to jump. I think there's many cases where, unfortunately, your increased activity in and around LinkedIn does get discovered by your workmates and in some cases supervisors. I don't think they do it intentionally, but I do think that LinkedIn is so massively popular and so ubiquitous. It just it's very possible that that's going to surface. And that's a disaster if you're not ready to deal with it.
We have a question about the UMass Career Center, I think more broadly than just what we have in Eisenberg, and access to European recruiting agencies. So I think we have fairly limited access and knowledge interaction with an international job market. But Nick, you might have more to say.
I think we should just say that capability is not mature on this campus at all. There are some pretty well-known recruiters that pop up on the web with regard to international positions. I think that's been a little bit abused in the last 18 to 24 months. There's obviously been some immigration issues in the United States for the past for the past 4+ years. And then with COVID restrictions and people having difficulty getting in and out of the country, even now with some changes that have been discussed relative to immigration for higher ed purposes, it has not come to fruition. There's been already several things that have sort of taken that to the back burner. Not that it's not important, I think it's very important, but it's not being acted on fast enough. So I cannot recommend a specific service. There's nothing that I'm aware of that's on the campus that would be a substitute for targeting inside a country or inside a region that you are interested in working in. This is kind of a backdoor thing. There's an organization in most major cities, which is called AmCham, capital A, lowercase m, capital C, HAM. It used to be short for American Chamber of Commerce. It is not officially linked to the United States government. It's kind of a not-for-profit organization that exists in pretty much every major city. And it's a great service for nationals of that country and then expatriates who are living and working in those countries or in those cities. Now, the reason that could be important to you is they oftentimes have job boards. So if you have language skills, or if you have some experience that lends itself to one or another of those cities because of the companies that are located there, AmCham is a very good, again, not guaranteed, but it's kind of a little bit of an industry secret. It's a good way to network and let people know you, the student, are interested in migrating to that city or to that country at some point in the future.
Thank you for that. I want to show something real quick. Mark asked about the LinkedIn profile, and people may or may not know this about LinkedIn. If you can see my screen, I have my LinkedIn site up. Is that what people see?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So when you're in your own profile, you can go to edit your profile and URL. If you click on this, hopefully it went with me. I don't know if it did, but you use this little pencil, you can edit your custom URL and create one that's much shorter and that is preferable for putting on your resume. We're going to have a LinkedIn session on November 15th, so people can join that and learn more about developing a more powerful LinkedIn profile. I'd also just like to quickly skip back to the question about the putting information on LinkedIn and sort of altering your profile while you're in your current employer present. So lots of times they already know about the MBA. They may even be paying for the MBA. I think that's some of your way in of showing what your accomplishments are through that. If you can safely do that, you can actually sort of talk about that in your workplace. You may find that people are interested in what you're doing with the MBA and that there is potential within the organization itself, especially if they are supporting the MBA. So I think that is a way in for you to sort of begin to reposition yourself publicly through LinkedIn without raising too many eyebrows. You have to do it carefully, of course, but if they're already in on it and know that about you, it's a very reasonable thing for you to be proud of and acknowledge publicly.
I'd like to add, Holly, that's a good point. That's pretty common. An awful lot of the students that I talk to who are in an MBA program, whether they're paying for it or the company's paying for it, do post articles or do make mention. I think they're doing that because I think they're proud of it, right? And they're working hard. So they're putting some of themselves into that profile, which means if they're successful getting a resume to this target or another resume to that target, the people that will be looking at the LinkedIn will see that. And they're not going to do anything, that's going to be problematic for the candidate. They're just passively going to look at that good news as well. So that's a very good point.
It's 1 o'clock and I don't want to hold people over. We will, as I said, be posting this recording, and we'll also be making the slides available. Our next session is a workshop on the elevator pitch on October 19th. It's also at noon, and we hope that you'll join us for that. And you can send us questions in the meantime. I put in the chat the URL for iConnect. You can find Nick and you can find me there if you want to follow up with us, as well as some other folks who are on your team as career and professional development supporters. We have one last question here about Facebook as a good place to post. I usually thank you everyone for coming. Feel free to jump off and we can just stay with this one question if you'd like. Appreciate your coming. Thank you. I'll just say for Facebook, I think it's kind of a mixed bag, and there's so much personal information that people usually have on Facebook. Unless there's some way you can keep it really professional, I would talk about my accomplishments, like, oh, I got a promotion, or I just, finished my MBA, but I wouldn't use that as a place to really put my professional self out there in any kind of significant way. I would lean on LinkedIn much more. Nick, do you have any?
I totally agree, Holly. I don't even have Facebook really in that spectrum. And if I did, it wouldn't even be secondary, it'd be tertiary.
So we'll be posting all of this on iConnect. We can also follow up with those of you registered and let you know where the information is, maybe even send you the direct links to it as well. So I think that's it for today. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Nick, for continuing to offer us such good wisdom on the resume and other things, career and professional development. Appreciate it, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.